Hi, Amanda. Welcome to the show.
Hey Max, how's it going?
Good. I'm doing very well. And that post you made for Kraut Crackers the other day, that was absolutely fantastic. So thank you for doing that.
Of course, a day of eats is always, people love that. People love to see what I'm eating every single day.
Yeah. I think, whatever the standard American diet is, I think you eat the opposite of that.
Yeah, I guess so. I feel like the
Um,
way, I feel like, I don't know if we're in like a little bubble of health people, but it seems like
mhm.
people are gravitating more towards this style of eating and it's becoming more acceptable. I feel like we're like going back in time, which is great. But it does feel like there is a trend towards eating more nutrient dense foods now. Hopefully.
Definitely. I would say so. And I think people like you are kind of pioneering that. And I'm curious though, like, because obviously, you're a big Kraut Cracker supporter, but what are the actual standards that you have for products that you will and will not endorse?
Yeah, I don't really like, I mean, obviously, as you see on my page, like, I don't really talk about too many products, especially food products.
Hmm.
I think e- I definitely lean towards more one ingredient foods in their whole form. However, I do think that it's sometimes nice to have, like I could eat sauerkraut, sure, but it's nice to have things that are a bit more like that give you a little bit of like a different taste or feel, or just things to add to your diet that make it a bit more interesting and exciting, But there is, like, I won't buy highly processed food, like hardly ever. I mean, sure, there's times where I'll like go get a pastry or something, but it's like very few and far between. Um, yeah, I think like organic, making sure that I know exactly every single ingredient that's in the food, that I would eat every single ingredient that's in that food on its own, and that it makes me feel good. That I don't feel like heavy or bogged down or that it upsets my gut in any way, and that it's ultimately leading me to where I want to go. Like whatever goal I have at that point in time, that it's getting me closer to that and not further away.
Yeah, and the same goes for supplements, I assume, as well.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, there is so much we can get in food, and at the same time, there's so much that we can't get in food, right? So, supplements are just helping me get to where I want to go or making me feel a certain way. I also think and I have this conversation often, like, there's, you should not be adding supplements if everything, I mean, I guess there's a time and a place for that, so I shouldn't say never, but I do think that you need to have all the foundations in place before you start adding all these supplements and thinking that they're going to change your life or your health when you don't have the foundations in place.
Mm, yeah. When you started, did you take any supplements? Like when you started your whole health journey, did you take any supplements, or was it mostly just focusing on the diet and then the nutrition and the lifestyle first?
Yeah, I think I probably leaned on supplements more than I needed to instead of actually focusing on the things that were going to give me the most benefit, which is, nutrition, exercise, lifestyle, sleep, light environment. Yeah, I did. I still take like a good amount of supplements now, but I think they're very targeted and they're like for a specific reason and I know exactly why I'm doing it. Before, when I first started, I think I was just like, oh, somebody talked about this, let me try it. Or like, oh, I mean, I went to so many doctors too, like in my journey, and functional practitioners, and they would just give me supplement after supplement to try without really talking to me about a lot of the other important things. Um, so yeah, I was like taking so many supplements. I mean, just for instance, so I just moved to Colorado and I had my stuff in storage for 4 years, 4 plus years, and I opened up probably like 5 boxes of just like so many supplements. And at the time, companies were also sending me supplements, so I would just like try this or you know experiment with this other supplement. So I was just taking so many supplements, and they weren't really doing anything because they weren't targeted for me and specifically what I needed. And I also didn't have the foundations in place the way that I do now.
Yeah, I think that the foundations are the most important thing. If you don't have that, then you shouldn't even think about taking supplements, honestly.
For sure. And I think most people are doing that. Most people are like, because it's like the shiny object syndrome. People are like, oh, it's just easier to take a supplement every day than it is to actually change your habits in your life. Mm-hmm. So it really is, it's enticing for people to think like, okay, I can just take the supplement and everything will be better, and that's not really how it works. Sure, it can help, it can make things better, but only when you have those in place.
Yeah, I guess, what was that journey like for you? When did that start, and how did you start getting a foundation in place, and what was your foundation like before?
I mean, it's been such a journey. So the way that I came into this field is I became a personal trainer basically by accident. I was living in LA. I was trying to be an actress at the time. And I was really just looking for a job where I could make good money and have a flexible schedule to go to auditions, because I would get auditions like the night before at like 10 a.m. or 12 p.m. the next day, and I'd have to like completely change my schedule. So like a 9 to 5 wasn't really ever in the cards for me. And so I kind of fell into it. A friend of mine was personal training, and so she was like, you should become a personal trainer. And at that time I was like not into health at all. Really never went to the gym, and I was like, absolutely not. I do not want to be one of those people who are like in a gym every day and like hyper focused on like working out. Not for me. No thank you. And then I don't know, I just was like, you know what, maybe this might not be such a bad thing. And at the time I was working at restaurants and like working till 2 or 3 in the morning, and that wasn't really conducive to feeling rested and awake and like feeling good the next day. And so I was like, okay. And so I got certified as a personal trainer and started doing that. And so I think like I went from like a standard American diet, and growing up, like my family's from Portugal, so we did eat pretty well, like Portuguese people eat like, I mean, I've been eating organ meat since I was a kid, and we eat mostly a whole food diet. And so I did grow up eating that, but going to college and just like being an adult, I was also eating like a shit ton of processed foods as well, and not working out and not really like living a healthy lifestyle. So I think from that I started understanding how to change your body composition. But again, it was a very basic view of that, calorie counting, working out, and even like my workouts are so different than my workouts are so different now than they were then. So it kind of evolved, and because I started training clients and started talking to clients about nutrition and health, I just like started diving deep into like reading all kinds of books and just trying to gather as much information as possible to be able to help these people and also help myself, because at that time I wasn't feeling good. I didn't feel good about my body. I didn't like, my gut health started to suffer just because of also like I was trying a ton of different diets, and just like led me down a bad path. I was vegan for a bit of time, and that just led me to all kinds of gut issues. And so I think I just became more and more passionate about the field of health and nutrition, and just started learning more. And there's been many iterations of health for me during the last like 10, 15 years, I would say. And yeah, I mean, now it's very different than it was then. I mean, I was still eating processed foods and eating like crackers, and just like being like, okay, I can have like 1 serving of crackers for this many calories, and like everything's gonna be okay if I just like stick to my calories. So yeah, I think that
great story,
question, sort of.
Yeah, definitely great story. Yeah, I like that you went all in, because I mean, what happened to acting? It just didn't work out for you?
I started building my nutrition business, and for a long time I wasn't successful at all. It was like getting nowhere and just like spending so much time, energy, and money. And I was like, getting to a place where I was getting older, and I'm like, what do I have to like show for my life? Like, this is not what I want my life to be. And at the same time as I was growing my nutrition business, I also started gaining more success in the acting field. So I was like getting really like good auditions, and I had an agent and a manager, and I was auditioning all of the time. But I think in growing my nutrition business, I saw that, I'm sorry, I'm hearing a bit of an echo.
Sorry?
I think it's better. I'm hearing a bit of an echo.
Can you hear it now?
Yeah.
Give me one sec.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay, we're back. So in growing my nutrition business, I started seeing that the effort and the time that I was putting into that was actually coming back to me, where it wasn't in my acting career. And so I took that as a sign that like, this is not what I should be doing. Like, I should be doing this thing that actually feels good, where I'm making an impact, where acting was very much like all about me, you know? And I just felt it just felt like a more rewarding experience, a more fulfilling experience to continue to grow my nutrition business. And so I just like started just losing the love for it. Like, I just was like, this is not what I want to be doing anymore. And then in that time, I think I just like started not caring, and then my agent dropped me, my manager dropped me. And then I was like, okay, I think this is a sign, like I'm done with this. And I just like went full into the nutrition business.
Yeah, going all into something's a good feeling.
Yeah, it was.
Especially when it's calling you.
Yeah, and it paid off, you know? Like, I was like, okay, this is, I do think like there is a time and a place for like, okay, maybe if you're not seeing results in something, you have to just like keep on and stick with it. But if you lose the love for it too, like, I think that was a big sign for me that it was not meant to be.
Yeah. Kind of we're living that LA lifestyle, I guess.
Yeah.
Then you transition from that into health coaching. So I guess you used to be a personal trainer. How has your coaching changed from back when you were a trainer to now? Obviously, you know, it's way different now, but specifically on the fitness side, you said your workouts were different then versus now. Specifically on the fitness side, what have you learned that has changed your perspective on the right ways to work out?
Well, I think I would say I thought I was making a big difference with people, like having them come in 2 to 3 times a week and working out. And sure, it does help, especially when somebody's sedentary and those are the only times that they're actually moving their body, or the only way that they will actually do strength training or movement or exercise. But it is a big part of it for sure, and it's still a big part of the way that I coach. I still write workout programs for my clients, but it's a very small portion of the work that I do, right? Like, exercising is great, but there's so much you can actually do without exercise. I mean, I think everybody should be working out, but there's so much more to getting healthy than just working out. And so now, well, even then too, I think in my workouts and also working with clients, I was having them do more like a circuit training type of workout, where I just like wanted to tire them out. I wanted them to be sore. I wanted them to like feel fatigued and be sweating and out of breath. And now that's like, I had just had a client the other day, she's like, I hate burpees. I don't want to do any burpees in my program. I'm like, don't worry, like, we will not be doing any burpees. So yeah, I was more focused on a more circuit training approach, and now I have a very much like strength focus, a lot of rest in between sets, and really like, I mean, there's times where I program more reps, but it's you know, I try to just get people feeling stronger and lifting more, and then resting quite a bit in between sets so they can give their full in that next set. Yeah. And I think people enjoy it more. I mean, I enjoy that more. It doesn't, and you know, there's people who will be like, I don't feel like I'm working hard. I'm like, great, that's exactly how you, like, I mean, you should feel like you're working hard in the set, but you shouldn't feel like you're leaving the gym like just like exhausted and like not able to do anything for the rest of the day. That's not how you should feel when you leave a workout.
No, definitely not. You want the total workout fatigue to be manageable, and that's going to help you recover more in between your workouts, and you're actually going to make more progress that way as opposed to like the other method of just tiring yourself out nonstop. And yeah, that's just unsustainable.
And it's hard for people to understand that until they actually do it and see the results. So a lot of time I have to just like, hold people's hand through it and say like, okay, let's try it. Maybe it doesn't work, but like, let's just try it and like see how you feel. And then they love it. And they're like, I'm getting so much stronger. I'm seeing my body composition change. I'm seeing the results of doing that. And that is how you fully understand if something works for you, is by trying it and being patient with it.
Yeah, no, you're right. This is like a very important lesson that I learned just throughout life. But like nothing that's worthwhile comes quickly. Everything that's worthwhile takes time. So anyone who like promises you fast results or is trying to sell you a quick fix is usually a scam or a con artist or something along those lines, because the reality is like, yes, inspiring someone to move with a sense of urgency is important, but the actual thing that you should be inspiring them is to do the work, not expect an outcome. This is a big difference.
Totally, and the outcome comes eventually, right? I mean,
Yeah.
hopefully. But yeah, you have to be patient. Everybody's different also. So it's like, sometimes people say like, well, when can I expect results? I'm like, I don't know. Hopefully you'll start feeling the effects fairly quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of results, like things take time, and everybody's body's different, and it takes time to like get to know somebody's body and see how they're reacting to certain things. So patience is the key.
Yes, definitely. Well, walk me through that process. So like you bring on a new client, and what is like the process like for them? Like what are they typically struggling with? Do you have a range of things that you help people with? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so a lot of people come to me for fat loss, also gut health issues. Other people come to me with chronic conditions, like some people just are struggling with energy or sleep, or runs the gamut of symptoms people come to me with. But most people are coming to me with fat loss goals and with gut health issues. And when a client comes to me, the first thing we would do is kind of just like, it's a 90-minute session when I first meet with a client, and I've already had them fill out probably an hour's worth of questionnaires and intake forms, because I really want to understand like what this person has been through, what they've tried, what's worked, what hasn't worked, what supplements they're on, what their exercise routine is like, what their daily life is like. So like, what are they doing when they first wake up in the morning? Like I talk to clients about their morning routine, their evening routine. What does that look like? What does their day-to-day look like? Is their job stressful? Is their relationship stressful? What, is their family life like? What was their family life like growing up? Because that is also important to how they're living their life and thinking about their health in general at this point. So we look at all of that. I also, a lot of the times, most of the time at this point, have clients do blood work. So like a full comprehensive blood panel, we look at that. And we look at both of those in conjunction and really try to figure out like what is actually causing the majority of their issues. And then we build from there. Again, we don't like, I don't solve a client's issue within, 2 weeks or a month, but we again work on the foundations. We sometimes we see a lot of nutrient deficiencies, let's say, in their blood work, and I try not to just throw a bunch of supplements at them. I'm like, okay, what is your diet like? Do we need to fill in these nutrient gaps and make sure that your diet is nutrient dense and you're getting everything you need? And if they're already doing that, then it's like, okay, well, maybe the gut is dysfunctional and that's why you're not absorbing these nutrients. So even though you're taking them in, we're not really absorbing them properly. So we kind of figure out what is the plan for them in the next couple weeks. We build the foundations. And then once those are all good and done, we kind of see where that client is now. Okay, are they still having all these symptoms, or have a lot of times all of their symptoms will suddenly go away when we like figure out their nutrition and their exercise habits and their sleep and their lifestyle. And then oftentimes that is not enough. And so we do create like a supplement protocol for them, or start to tweak things that are their habits and their lifestyle in order to get them to where they want to go.
Yeah, sounds very comprehensive.
Yes. Yes, and it has to be. Like, at least for a lot of people, it does have to be. You know, I think a lot of people are just like trying to like throw a bunch of things at the wall and seeing what sticks, or like, okay, I'm just going to improve my diet and I'm just going to improve my light environment and my sleep and everything will be okay. And sometimes that's the case, but not always, especially somebody with like chronic condition that they've been dealing with for years and years.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's important. Like, Western medical advice doesn't help us with these like chronic conditions typically. They're not suggesting to go change the diet. I mean, they will at a very surface level, but I imagine it's nowhere near the extent that you are like actively involved with their diet.
Yeah, and a lot of, you know, these practitioners or doctors, they don't have the time to sit with a client and ask them questions and like hear them out and listen to them, you know, and sometimes it could be like the simplest thing. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, like I was just having a conversation with a client and I'm like, you're not drinking enough water. Like, if you're not even drinking enough water, like, it's going to be so hard to feel okay. And so like sometimes it's like the simplest things, and that's like, it's so easy to overlook those things, you know, especially when somebody's like doing all of the right, quote unquote, right things, and like eating really well and sleeping well and all of those things. And it's like, oh, we're actually not drinking enough water. And that sometimes like takes some digging, because sometimes people are like, yeah, I drink water.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, you're drinking 1 glass of water in the morning.
Yeah. That's not enough.
No. And also like, you know, sometimes I feel a little bit like a therapist, because we do dive into like what's going on in terms of their family life and relationships. And a lot of times if you're in a toxic situation or a relationship that's like just making you feel super stressed or unhappy, that's going to cause a lot of issues. And it's also going to be hard to like not go to food or not try to like fill yourself up with other things that are not healthy for you.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of like the internal definitely impacts the external. And what I would say to that too is like, if you're experiencing a lot of stress just like in your life, that can very easily negatively impact your gut health, your hormonal health, everything about your health really, because stress plays a very important role in how you feel and also how your body works. It's not negligible, because people think like, oh, I'm working out, so my muscles are sore. So like that's one type of stress, and then like, you know, I'm dealing with like this issue with my partner over here, but that's completely separate. But like you actually just have one like total stress tolerance, and like everything contributes to that. So you need to manage stress on all fronts.
Yeah, totally. And then if you're stressed at home and then also not sleeping well and then also working out too much, also then not eating enough, at some point your body's not going to be responding the way you want it to.
Yeah, you're very right. Do you have like one client in particular that stands out to you, that you remember their transformation? You're like, wow, that was amazing.
I mean, there's so many. You know what? I was just thinking this morning about a client, and she recently just finished with me, and I've been thinking about this a lot because she came to me with all kinds of gut issues and not feeling well and not being able to sleep and just feeling tired all the time and just all kinds of chronic issues. And towards the end of our work together, she was like, okay, like, I want abs. Like, I want to get abs. Like, can I, like, when? Like, do you think that I could do that? And I was like, this is interesting, because so much of our work together was getting her to feel better, and she wasn't even focused on body composition really at all. And we were working towards that as well, because that was one of her goals. But it wasn't at the forefront of her attention. And she got to a place where like everything else was like feeling good. She was like feeling so good in so many other aspects of her life that she was like, okay, now I can actually like focus on body composition, right? Which I thought was like so nice. I was like, what a great thing to say, actually. Like, of course, when somebody comes to you with all these gut issues and they're like, okay, now I want abs like tomorrow. Like, okay, that's not really a realistic expectation at the moment. But to be feeling so well and have all the other issues just like disappear and you're not even thinking about that anymore, or you can actually think about like, ooh, I kind of want some abs, is like such a nice feeling.
Yeah.
Because you cannot be focused, like you aren't focused on like those extra nice little things if you're so unwell.
I imagine you've heard the saying like, a healthy man has 1,000 problems, a sick man only has one.
Oh yeah,
That's what that reminds me of.
exactly. Exactly. And
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, you can't. It's, and this is how I felt about my own transformation when I started, and also just how I feel about health in general. Like, it's not about being at a certain body fat percentage. It's not about lifting a certain amount of weight. It's about what all those things give you in your life. That you're able to overcome those things, number one. You're able to focus because you're not feeling unwell, and everything, you know, your nutrition and your exercise is all pretty dialed in, so that when you go to like work on your business or on a project, or you go to work, like you can actually be focused on that. You can be productive. You can feel good about that. When you go on a date or when you're with your partner, you can actually be very present and be able to fully enjoy those moments and actually enjoy and live your life, because that's what this is all about. Like, it's not just about like getting some abs or like feeling a bit leaner. It's about all the other things that you can accomplish when you're healthy.
That was a good like brand thesis right there.
Exactly. Yeah. That's, I mean, this is why I do what I do, you know?
Yeah. I like that you touched on the mindfulness component too, because I'm also really big on that. Mindfulness is huge, and a lot of the reasons that people do end up overeating or just doing any kind of excess consumption is because they're not aware of what's driving them to do that. There's this fundamental feeling of like, I'm not good enough. I need to suppress these negative experiences, these negative feelings that I'm going through. And that manifests in the form of like over-consuming on junk food, over-consuming on media, whatever it is. And it's a lack of presence and an unwillingness to sit with your uncomfortable feelings, uncomfortable emotions, because that stuff is always going to be there. You're never going to feel good 24/7. That's an unrealistic expectation. You could definitely skew the ratio to be very favorable. Like, you're going to feel good most of the time, but there's always going to be like negative thoughts that come up in your mind. And if you're not aware of that, it can lead you down a very dark path.
Totally. And one of the things that I do with clients is like have them fill out a food journal for the first few weeks. And I think it's just so helpful for anybody to do, even if you're not working with anybody. And I have a food journal that like has little rows or columns for your mood and how you're feeling and what's going on and like your movement. And oftentimes I'll see in somebody's food journal like, okay, overate this meal or whatever, or like they would, you know, ate something that wasn't the healthiest for them, or ate a bunch of sugar or processed food or something. And so we'll like look through the food journal and they're like, okay, had a fight with so-and-so, or like had a stressful time at work, or, you know, maybe like a few hours before that. And I think that's the most valuable part of the food journal, is like connecting those dots for them, because a lot of times you're right, like people aren't aware of that, right? So I'm like, oh, interesting, like you overate this meal. Like, do you think that had anything to do with this thing that happened like a couple hours before? And they're like, oh, I didn't even actually think about that. And I'm like, okay, now we can actually work on that, and now we can like set some habits in place for when stressful things happen, right? And we can like dive into that a little bit as well.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some things you put in place for like stressful events, stressful times?
I love breath work. So if somebody, it is tough though. Like
Mm-hmm.
especially if somebody's like very unaware, if they can just even sit for like 5 minutes and just breathe, a lot of times they can just become aware of what's going on instead of then just like jumping to food to numb themselves out.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes too, I see people, and this is really common, I find in like maybe like a younger client, and I would say like maybe like 20s, early 30s, especially like people being very social and going out to dinners. A lot of times people will be great at home when they're by themselves, and then they go into these social settings and either they don't even want to be out with these people, so they're just again numbing themselves with food, or they feel some sort of pressure to just eat like everybody else is eating. And I'm like, why did you have those chips, or why did you have dessert? And it's one thing for somebody to say, I really wanted it, fine, like I can't really argue with that. Like, sure, we could talk about some other things that are related to that, but people are like, well, everybody else was eating it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, so do you feel like you're not going to be accepted? Like, do you feel like somehow you're going to be ostracized if you don't eat like everybody else? So I really like start to implement like even like verbiage in terms of what they can say. I had a client yesterday who I was speaking to about alcohol. And it's like, well, everybody else is drinking. So it's like, I just kind of feel like I should be drinking too. And I'm like, okay, what if you just say like, I don't really know if I want to drink right now. Can I just have like a soda water and like, I'm going to think about it. Like just giving yourself some space instead of just immediately going to like, this is what I always do and this is what everybody else is doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it gets very complex. But yeah, I think breath work is really helpful for that. Just like taking a beat, like just again using your words and just saying like, I don't know, like I'm not, or I don't really want that right now. I'm not really sure. Taking a walk is like, it seems so simple, but such a powerful habit. Like even if you could just like take a walk before you go and make a meal and just like be with yourself, like no podcasts, no music, just no phone calls, no checking your text, checking social media, just being with yourself and checking in with yourself. Like, are you actually even hungry right now? What do you want? What are you craving? What does feel nourishing to your body at this point in time?
Yeah. It's okay to be bored.
Yeah. It's so hard to be bored these days, It's so easy to just like scroll.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I mean, being bored is good. It's like good for you. It makes you more interesting because that's when the creativity actually arises, is when you're in those moments where you're not stimulated by anything because your mind has to sort of come up with its own stimulation.
Yeah. And like having, leisure time is great,
Mm-hmm.
but it should be used. It should be, you don't want to just leisure time where you're like scrolling or just doing things that are not really going to be good for your brain, because it's not, like people think that's, like, oh, I'm just going to scroll for an hour and that's restful. It's actually not. It's like very stimulating,
No.
and you actually just feel worse after you don't feel rested. You feel like just like more activated.
Yeah, you feel it. Your dopamine is drained, so then doing anything after that is going to feel more difficult. That's a very tricky trap. Versus like if you just like sat or went on a walk or did something that was very like low dopamine, low stimulation, you'd have a lot more energy to go dive into whatever the thing is that you were going to work on after that.
Yeah, or read a book.
Yeah, yeah. Reading's great. Are you reading anything right now?
I'm actually reading. Well, I'm reading 2 books right now. I read a book in the mornings that's like a bit more stimulating, and then I try to read like fiction or something like very low key at night. I'm reading Deep Work right now. Have you read it?
Deep Work. I've listened to about half of it on audiobook. It's a pretty long book, right?
It's not.
No?
I don't. It's like, I mean, on my No, it's like 200 something pages or something.
Oh,
250?
never mind. But yeah, I've read
It
some of
does look like a big book because I actually
Yeah.
have seen it. I don't know, but I'm like towards the end, and I just started reading it like I don't know, maybe a week ago.
Yeah. So you're gonna turn your house into like a cave, basically with no windows, no outside stimulation, just like a little work box.
He doesn't really say that in the book.
Really? I thought
I don't think so.
he talks about the most ideal working environment, and he says that it's like basically like no windows, no stimulation, no distraction. That's like the most ideal work environment, is from what I remember.
Maybe I haven't gotten there yet,
Yeah.
but absolutely not. I will not be doing that. I prefer to work outside if the temperature is okay. Right now, it's not. I do like to have windows in front of me. I like to have actually a window open slightly, even if it's cold, in front of me, and natural lighting as much as possible. But I do think there is something to be said for like no distractions, you know,
Yeah,
or as minimal distractions as possible.
just locking in. Yeah, right now I'm reading it's called Going Infinite.
Okay,
It's a biography of Sam Bankman-Fried.
I don't know who that is.
He's the guy who had the crypto exchange FTX that collapsed, and he went to prison basically for fraud because it was discovered that he was like embezzling money from the actual people who invested in the platform. So basically, like one day, people just like woke up and they're like tens of thousands of dollars of crypto was just like gone, and yeah, so he's in jail.
So what have you learned from that book?
I've learned that you can't trust mainstream. You can't trust mainstream crypto exchanges, so it's always good to like self-custody your crypto. And then also I've learned just what kind of character it takes to make multiple billions of dollars. Like at one point he was worth $40 billion, I think, and people were saying that he was going to be the world's first trillionaire and all this crazy stuff about that guy. But in this book, it really goes into like his life and how different he was from the average person and how weird his mannerisms were. Even though he worked on Wall Street making like $600K a year, he like didn't have any lifestyle. He didn't invest into any properties. He literally just like saved all his money and like wore like the same like jeans and t-shirt into like the office every day, and like he was just a different type of person. And to me it's very fascinating to learn about different types of people, and that's kind of why I do this podcast too, is just to talk to different types of people. I think it's fascinating, and I always value getting new perspectives because that kind of helps shape my own.
Love it.
Yeah. Well, pivoting back to you, there's a lot of advice out there on the internet, and not all of it's good. There's some good advice, there's some bad advice, but in this whole like holistic health space, what's like the one piece of advice that annoys you the most?
I would say, I think there's a big push in the holistic health space that like calories don't matter. And I think it's very frustrating for a lot of people because people are like, I'm eating so healthy. I'm eating the way that all these other people are eating. I eat just like you. I hear this all the time. I eat just like you, but like, I don't look like you. Or like, I just like, I haven't lost any weight, especially when it comes to fat loss. Or even gut health too, because like people are like, I'm doing all of these things. I mean, okay, so we'll stick to calories. No, I don't want to go on a tangent here, but yeah, that calories don't matter. And I think for some people, if you just focus on a nutrient-dense diet, eating 3 meals a day, eating to satiety, eating when you're hungry, you could get to the body composition you want. it's possible. But for a lot of people, I think that there has to be some sort of attention on calories, whether you're tracking or not, or you're just like super aware of how many calories something has, because people could be eating like pork for every single meal and like, you know, or like fatty steaks for every meal plus carbohydrates. And then you're like, okay, well, yeah, you're probably eating at a maintenance at this point, because you're not fully understanding that certain foods are going to have a lot more calories for the amount of protein that they have. And so you just can't eat freely and expect to get to a certain body composition goals, especially when it comes to like losing the last like 10 pounds or getting abs or, you know, and the opposite is true as well in terms of building muscle, right? So it's like I find a lot of people are just like not eating enough. They're eating the best foods, healthy foods, they're eating to satiety, and they're like, I can't get stronger in the gym and I can't grow any muscles because they're not eating enough. And you need to have some sort of awareness, whether it's tracking or tracking for an amount of time so that you really learn, so that you can be intuitive with it. But I think that's probably one of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to advice that people are spewing in the holistic health field.
Yeah, I like that. I like that too, because I think definitely the more things you track, the more awareness you're going to have about what's going on with your body. And the way I see it is like caloric restriction is one type of restriction. There's also food restriction, so restricting the foods that you eat. So if you're not allowing yourself different foods, that's another way of limiting your at the end of the day, all of this is about limiting your caloric intake. Totally. So that's why tracking calories in terms of fat loss, let's say, tracking your calories is the most specific way, I think, to figure out what's going on with your diet. But then if you want to say, you know, for some people that's too much. They don't need it, they don't want to do it. Fine. You can limit your food intake, and that also works for some people. Or you can do intermittent fasting or like time restricted feeding. That's like another form of restrictions, only eating within a certain window. I find for myself that tracking calories gives me the most flexibility because, you know, I do stick to like only like nutrient dense single whole foods, but in terms of like the timing, I don't necessarily like to restrict myself to eating in certain times, but that's just me.
Yeah, totally. And there's like many levers you can pull, right? So it's like you could restrict carbs, you could restrict fat, you could restrict the amount of time that you're eating. You can do a carnivore diet. You know, you can like stick to one food group. But yeah, I do think, and I agree, and I do find that it is the most freeing, because you're like, okay, I could also eat this when I want, if I want it. And of course, that, you know, you have to be disciplined with that as well. And so I think that's the argument that people have. Well, it's like, okay, well, you have to be so disciplined if you're going to like allow other foods to come in. But I think there's a balance in between that.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I very much like, I'm like a rebel in a lot of ways. So if you tell me like I can't eat carbs or something, like I'm like, that's all I want is carbs, and that's all I'm going to eat is carbs, right? But it's like you tell me like I can really eat whatever I want. I'm going to be pretty moderate and eat the foods that actually make me feel good, because especially if you're aware of how foods make you feel, you're going to choose the best foods. But you're still then going to be able to get to your goal by allowing the foods that you want to eat.
Definitely.
And when you want to eat them.
Definitely. Well, on the flip side, what's like one of the mainstream health advice that annoys you the most? Because that's kind of the other end of the spectrum.
I guess I'll stick to the same theme here and say that calories are the only thing that matters when it comes to fat loss. You know,
two things can be true at the same time.
Exactly. And I see, you know, this sometimes I scroll through some posts and I see people like what I eat in a day from like dietitians or like fitness people, and it's like atrocious. And I'm like, this is like, and then you see them and I'm like, what? Like, you see them and like they're skin is terrible,
Mm-hmm.
or they don't look healthy, and you're like, okay, sure, like maybe you have gotten to the body composition that you want, or you're getting there, but you're probably not feeling good in the process. So sure, it can get you there, but it's going to be much harder. You're probably going to have to restrict even more intensely because your metabolism isn't working the way it's supposed to, or optimally. And you're then going to probably be dealing with all kinds of gut issues if you just focus on calories.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's so many now like low calorie alternatives that are just ultra processed, and the messaging that we get from mainstream health is that calories are the only thing that matters, and then also like limit saturated fat, eat the polyunsaturated fats from seed oils, and it's like, what's going on here? There's definitely more nuance, and people aren't necessarily exploring that nuance. I mean, I value people who are capable of nuance like yourself, because at the same time you're like, calories do matter, they are important, but let's also focus on improving the quality of our food as well.
Yeah, and that's another thing that annoys me is like when you see people saying like absolutes. It's there's very little that is absolute in the nutrition world. It might be absolute for you at this point in time, but it might not be true for you a week from today, or a month from today, or a year from today, and it might not be true for somebody who's watching. And I think that's where we run into a lot of trouble, is people speak in absolutes, and then the person, as a client or the person watching, they start to think something's wrong with them because that doesn't work for them.
Yeah, it's just really, that's what gets clicks. So people like to do it. But you should never trust anyone who says always or never.
Yeah, I agree.
Great. Well, what's next for your coaching? What's next for Raw Fitness Nutrition? What do you have in the pipeline for us?
Always evolving. One of the things I've been thinking about, and it's probably one of the things I'm focused on this year, is I have a couple courses. And I think I'm going to be taking those courses and kind of chopping them up and really creating more like low ticket and courses that are more, that can reach more people, that people can access at a lower price, that are very specific towards specific goals. So I have a fat loss course and a gut health course, and those are very like broad. So I'm thinking about just like creating like more mini courses to help people kind of get from like A to B. So that's one thing I'm focused on. I'm also seeing a lot more clients these days. I took a long break from seeing clients, so now I'm back in it, and I love it. It's so fun and it's so rewarding, and I miss it so much. And then I have another little, not necessarily call it a secret project, but I'm moving into I'm creating a food product. And that's in the very beginning stages, so I don't want to talk about it too much because I don't want to give myself a dopamine hit when it's not really fully dove in yet. But that's super exciting for me because it's very new and a lot to learn. And we should definitely have a conversation about this, but that is something I'm very excited about.
Definitely, I'd love to, we could talk about that on the back end for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, it's very exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing all the stuff that you got planned coming out. I know you're very active on social media, so where can people find you, find your work?
Mostly on Instagram. That's where I spend most of my time, at Raw Fitness and Nutrition. I also have an email list. There's a bunch of like free guides that I have on my website, so rawfitnessandnutrition.com. You can download any of those free guides. And that's mostly, I'm also on Twitter, Raw Fit Nutrition, I believe. I'm like not on there as much as I would like to be, but hoping to create more content on there as well.
Great. Love it. Amanda, thank you so much for coming on, and it was a great conversation.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.